I wired her the money for the church deposit, the gown, even the food trays for her family. She picked the date. She called me husband before we even had the papers. I even practiced the vows on video calls, like a damn fool. Then one night, her cousin messaged me by mistake. And I saw it. Her wedding. Just not to me. My name is Vernon. I'm 58 years old, retired marine engineer from Broome, Western Australia. This is my confession about the woman who took $15,000 from me and married another man with my money. Her name was Elaine, 23 years old from Davao City. Wedding coordinator by day, call center agent by night. And the best liar I've ever met in my life. Hold on, babe. Let me turn the camera so you can see better. Elaine's voice crackled through my laptop speakers as she adjusted her phone. The screen wobbled, then settled on her standing in front of a mirror, wearing the most beautiful white wedding dress I'd ever seen. My heart nearly stopped. What do you think, Vernon? Do I look like your wife? I was sitting at my kitchen table in Broome, holding a piece of paper with my wedding vows written in my own handwriting. I'd been practicing them for weeks, reading them aloud during our video calls. Elaine, you look absolutely stunning. That dress is perfect on you. She spun around slowly, the fabric flowing like water. The seamstress had to take it in twice. I told her my husband is very particular about how I should look. She giggled and blew me a kiss through the screen. Say your vows again, babe. I want to hear them one more time. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the paper. I'd rewritten these vows 14 times, trying to get them perfect. Elaine Marie Santos, from the moment you said hello in that Facebook message, I knew my life would never be the same. I promise to love you, protect you, and give you the life you deserve. Age is just a number, but love is forever. Oh my God, Vernon, you're going to make me cry. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I can't wait to be Mrs. Elaine Richards. Just 3 more weeks, babe. 3 more weeks and we'll be husband and wife. I looked down at my bank statement on the table. 15,000 Australian dollars. Gone. 4 wire transfers over 4 months. The church deposit. The dress she was wearing. The catering for her family. The marriage license fees. Every penny I'd saved from my early retirement settlement after the shoulder injury that ended my career at 37 years in marine engineering. Did the church confirm the time again? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I want to make sure my flight lands with enough time to get ready. Yes, babe. 2 o'clock on Saturday, March 18th. Everything is perfect. My family is so excited to meet you. My mama keeps asking when you're going to call her. Elaine moved closer to the camera, her face filling the screen. You're not nervous, are you? No, sweetheart. I'm not nervous. I'm ready to start our life together. That was a lie. I was terrified. Not of marrying her, but of losing her. In 4 months, she'd become my entire world. Every morning started with her good morning message. Every night ended with her voice saying she loved me. I'd never felt this connected to another human being in my life. Vernon, I need to tell you something. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Last night, I had a dream about our wedding. You were standing at the altar in that blue suit you bought, and when I walked down the aisle, you started crying. Happy tears. I probably will cry, I admitted. I never thought I'd get married again after what happened with Sandra. Your ex-wife was a fool for leaving you, babe. But I'm glad she did because now you're mine. She pressed her lips to the camera screen. Kiss me back. I kissed my laptop screen like an idiot. A 58-year-old man kissing his computer monitor because a 23-year-old girl in the Philippines told him to. But in that moment, it felt real. It felt like love. I transferred the final payment yesterday, I said. The makeup artist and photographer. Everything should be covered now. You're so good to me, Vernon. I don't deserve you. She adjusted the dress straps and looked at herself in the mirror again. My friends keep asking how I got so lucky. A successful engineer from Australia who treats me like a princess. I'm the lucky one, Elaine. When I was lying in that hospital bed after the accident, wondering if I'd ever work again, I never imagined I'd find you. God brought us together, babe. I really believe that. She started unbuttoning the dress. I have to take this off now. The seamstress is coming back in an hour for the final fitting. But Vernon? Yes? I love you more than you'll ever know. The screen went black before I could respond. I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark laptop monitor, holding my wedding vows like they were sacred scripture. In 3 weeks, I'd be on a plane to Manila. In 3 weeks, I'd marry the woman who'd saved me from becoming a bitter, lonely old man in a mining town. I folded the vows carefully and put them in my wallet, right next to the printed email confirmation for my flight. March 15th, Brisbane to Manila, economy class, one way. I'd bought a round-trip ticket originally, but Elaine convinced me to change it. "Why would you want to come back without me?" she'd asked. "We're going to live here together, remember?" I'd shipped most of my furniture to storage and given my landlord notice. My whole life fit into 3 suitcases now. The rest was going to be our new life in the Philippines. Elaine had found us an apartment in Makati. 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, swimming pool. The deposit was another $800 I'd wired last month. My phone buzzed with a text from my son Kyle in Perth. "Dad, still haven't heard from you about Christmas plans. Mum wants to know if you're coming to dinner this year." I started typing a response, then deleted it. How do you tell your 30-year-old son that you're marrying a girl 7 years younger than him? How do you explain that you've found love again at 58, and she lives 8,000 kilometers away? Instead, I opened Facebook and scrolled to Elaine's profile. Her cover photo was a picture of us together, digitally combined from our separate selfies. Her profile status said getting married to Vernon Richards in 3 weeks, with a heart emoji, 47 likes, comments from her friends in Tagalog that I couldn't understand, but I assumed they were congratulations. Her latest post was from the dress fitting. "Final preparations for my special day. Thank you to my amazing fiancé for making all my dreams come true. I love you, Vernon." The photo showed her from behind in the wedding dress, face turned toward the mirror. She looked like an angel. I commented, "You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the Philippines." 3 minutes later, she replied, "Only for you, my love." I closed the laptop and walked to my bedroom. On the nightstand was a framed photo of us that she'd mailed me last month. Actually, it was 2 separate photos cut and pasted together, but her letter said she couldn't wait until we could take real pictures together. I picked it up and traced her face with my finger. In the photo, she was wearing a yellow sundress and smiling at the camera. Her hair was long and black, her skin smooth and perfect. Next to her, I looked older than my years. Gray hair, weathered face, crow's feet around my eyes. But we looked happy together, even if it was just photo editing. 3 more weeks, I said aloud to the empty room. 3 more weeks and I'll never be alone again. I had no idea that in 3 weeks, I'd discover that love and lies can sound exactly the same when spoken by the right person. I had no idea that the most beautiful words can hide the ugliest truths. And I had no idea that the woman I was practicing vows for was already married to someone else. It was a Tuesday night in October when I first saw Elaine's name in my inbox. I'd joined an expat Facebook group called Australians in Southeast Asia 3 months earlier, not because I was planning to move, but because I was curious about what life might look like somewhere else. Somewhere warmer. Somewhere I could stretch my retirement savings further than Broom's inflated cost of living. The post that changed everything was titled, "Visa Questions for Aussie Retirees." Some bloke from Darwin was asking about retirement visas for the Philippines. I almost scrolled past it, but something made me stop and read the comments. Most were the usual complaints about paperwork and bureaucracy, but one comment stood out. "Hi. I work part-time helping expats with visa applications in Davao. If you need assistance, I'm happy to help. Welcome to the Philippines." It was signed Elaine Santos with a smiley face emoji. I clicked on her profile before I could think twice. The cover photo showed a beach sunset with text overlaid, "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." Her profile picture was professional, like a corporate headshot. Beautiful girl with long black hair and a genuine smile, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes. I sent her a private message at 11 p.m., not expecting a response. "Hi Elaine, I saw your comment about helping with visas. I'm not ready to move yet, but I'm curious about the process. What's it like living in Davao?" She replied within 10 minutes. "Hi Vernon. Davao is amazing. It's safe, affordable, and the people are very welcoming to foreigners. I've helped several Australians relocate here. What's your situation?" We messaged back and forth for 2 hours that night. She told me she worked as a freelance wedding coordinator and picked up extra money doing call center work for an Australian telecommunications company. That's why her English was perfect, she said. She'd been practicing with native speakers for 3 years. "What made you interested in the Philippines?" she asked. I found myself typing more honestly than I'd planned. I retired early after a shoulder injury, workers' compensation settlement. I'm 58 and suddenly have all this time and no idea what to do with it. Broome is expensive and lonely. I keep thinking there has to be more to life than sitting in my apartment watching Netflix. There definitely is. Life here is about family, community, enjoying simple pleasures. How long since you retired? 8 months. It's been the longest 8 months of my life. That sounds really hard. Do you have family nearby? 2 sons in Perth. We're not close. My ex-wife remarried 5 years ago. I don't really have anyone to talk to most days. There was a pause before her next message. I'm sorry, Vernon. Loneliness is terrible, but maybe this is the universe telling you it's time for a new chapter. Something about the way she wrote that made my chest tight. When was the last time someone had shown genuine concern for my feelings? When was the last time anyone had asked how I was doing and waited for a real answer? What about you? I typed. What's your story? I'm 23, never married. I live with my parents and my younger brother. I studied hospitality management in college, which is how I got into wedding planning. I love helping people create their perfect day. There's something magical about watching 2 people promise to love each other forever. That's beautiful. You sound like a romantic. Guilty. I believe in true love, soulmates, all of it. My friends think I'm old-fashioned, but I think when you find the right person, age doesn't matter, background doesn't matter. What matters is how they make you feel. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. I used to believe that. 25 years of marriage taught me otherwise. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? She said I was emotionally unavailable, too focused on work, never home. Then one day she said she'd fallen out of love with me and wanted to start over with someone who could make her happy. I'm so sorry, Vernon, she didn't deserve you. Those 6 words hit me harder than anything anyone had said to me in years. This girl who didn't even know me was taking my side in a story she'd heard only half of. She was defending me against someone she'd never met. You don't even know me, I typed. Maybe she was right. I know you enough to know you're kind. You're thoughtful. You ask questions and listen to the answers. You've been talking to me for 2 hours and haven't said anything inappropriate or tried to get my phone number. That tells me you're a gentleman. My hands were shaking as I typed my next message. What's your phone number? She sent it immediately, followed by, I was wondering when you'd ask. I have unlimited international calling on my plan. Want to talk? I called her at 1:30 a.m. my time, 7:30 p.m. hers. When she answered, her voice was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. Soft, musical, with just a trace of an accent that made every word sound like a song. Hi, Vernon. Hi, Elaine. This is crazy. What's crazy? I never do this. I don't talk to strangers online. I don't call people I've never met. But something about you feels different. Maybe because I'm not a stranger, she said quietly. Maybe we knew each other in another life. We talked for 3 hours that first night. She told me about her family's small sorry store, her dreams of expanding her wedding planning business, her favorite Korean dramas. I told her about 37 years of working on ships, the accident that crushed my shoulder and ended my career, the silence that had filled my life since the divorce. You have such a nice voice, she said as we were about to hang up. Deep and calm. It makes me feel safe. You make me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. What's that? Hopeful. After that first call, we talked every day. She'd call me during her lunch break at the call center, which was early morning my time. I'd call her in the evenings when she got home from work. We graduated to video calls after a week, and the first time I saw her face moving and smiling and talking directly to me, I knew I was in trouble. You're much more handsome than your photos, she said during that first video call. She was sitting in what looked like her bedroom, with posters of K-pop bands on the walls behind her. You're much more beautiful than I could have imagined, I replied. Age really is just a number, isn't it? When I'm talking to you, I forget you're 58. You have such a young heart. Within 2 weeks, she was calling me babe. Within 3 weeks, she was saying, I love you, at the end of every call. Within a month, she was making plans for me to visit the Philippines. Within 2 months, she was talking about marriage like it was already decided. I've never felt this way about anyone, she said during a late-night call in December. My friends think I'm crazy for falling in love with someone I've never met in person, but the heart knows what the heart knows. I feel the same way, I said. I know this sounds insane, but I think you might be the person I was meant to find. I know I am, she said simply. Vernon, I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to feel pressured. Ask me anything. Would you ever consider getting married here in the Philippines? I know it's a big step, but my family is very traditional. If we're going to be together, they'd expect us to do it properly. My heart was pounding. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking if you'd want to marry me. If the answer is yes, I'll start making arrangements. I plan weddings for a living, remember? I can make it perfect for us. I looked around my empty apartment. Stacks of DVDs I'd watched a dozen times each. Takeaway containers from the same 3 restaurants I rotated between. A calendar with no appointments marked on any of the days. Yes, I said. I'd love to marry you. Her scream of joy nearly broke my laptop speakers. Really? Vernon? Really? Really? When? As soon as possible. I don't want to wait another day longer than we have to. That was December 15th. By December 20th, she'd found a church. By Christmas, she'd picked a date. By New Year's, she'd sent me a shopping list for everything we'd need to make it happen. I should have wondered why she moved so fast. I should have questioned why a 23-year-old girl would want to marry a 58-year-old man she'd known for 2 months. I should have asked more questions about her family, her finances, her past relationships. Instead, I wired her the first payment on January 3rd, $3,000 for the church deposit and her wedding dress. When she sent me the receipt and a photo of herself holding it, I felt like the luckiest man alive. I had no idea that luck and stupidity can feel exactly the same when you're desperate enough to believe in fairy tales. Babe, I have some bad news. Elaine's voice was shaky during our morning video call in late January. She was wearing a white t-shirt with her hair pulled back, no makeup, looking younger than her 23 years. The church coordinator called yesterday. They need an additional payment for the venue. I was drinking my coffee at the kitchen table, still in my pajamas. It was 7 a.m. my time, 5 p.m. hers. How much additional? $2,000. I'm so sorry, Vernon. I thought the initial deposit covered everything, but apparently there are fees for the flowers, the music, the photographer they provide. I told her we can't afford it, but she said if we don't pay by Friday, they'll give our date to another couple. My stomach dropped. $2,000 on top of the 3 we already paid? I know it's a lot of money. Maybe we should postpone the wedding until we can save more. Tears started forming in her eyes. I just wanted everything to be perfect for us. No. I said it before I could think it through. We're not postponing anything. I'll figure out the money. Vernon, you've already done so much. I feel terrible asking for more. You're not asking, I'm offering. This is our wedding, Elaine. Our future. Money is just paper. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Are you sure? I don't want you to go broke because of me. I'm not going broke. I have savings. This is what savings are for. That wasn't entirely true. The first $3,000 had already stretched my budget, but I had credit cards. I had equity in some old mining stocks. I'd figure it out. You're the most amazing man in the world, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. You don't have to make anything up to me. This is what people do when they love each other. I wired the money that afternoon. $2,000 Australian to her bank account in Davao City. She sent me a selfie of herself at the bank holding the deposit receipt, smiling so big it made my heart ache. 3 weeks later, it was the catering. The food coordinator needs a deposit for the reception, she explained during another morning call. She was at work, speaking quietly so her coworkers couldn't hear. My family is so excited about meeting you, they keep inviting more people. We're up to 80 guests now. 80 people? I thought it was going to be small. In Filipino culture, weddings are community celebrations. Everyone wants to be part of our special day. But more people means more food, which means a bigger deposit. How much bigger? $1,500. But Vernon, the menu sounds incredible. Lechon, lumpia, pancit, rice cakes for dessert. Your family is going to love Filipino cuisine. I didn't have the heart to tell her that my family consisted of 2 sons who hadn't returned my calls in 3 months. $1,500 on top of the 5 we've already paid? I know it's adding up. Maybe we can cut the guest list? No, if your family wants to celebrate with us, that's what we'll do. I want this to be the wedding you've always dreamed of. I love you so much it hurts sometimes, she whispered into the phone. You're making all my dreams come true. The catering deposit was followed 2 weeks later by the bridal party expenses. Elaine needed dresses for her maid of honor and flower girl, plus suits for her brother and cousin who were standing up with us. Another $800. This is the last unexpected expense, I promise, she said. After this, everything is covered. Then it was her father's medical emergency. A heart palpitation that required tests at a private hospital in Davao. Her family couldn't afford the deposit for the cardiac screening. I can't ask you for more money, she said, crying during our video call. You've already given us so much, but if something happens to my papa before the wedding, I'll never forgive myself. How much do they need? $1,000. But Vernon, this isn't wedding money. This is my family's health. I can't let you pay for this. Your family is about to become my family. Of course I'm going to pay for it. What if people think I'm only marrying you for money? Are you only marrying me for money? No. God, no. I'm marrying you because I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. Then it doesn't matter what people think. I wired the money that same day. Elaine's father got his tests, which came back normal. Just stress, the doctor said. Wedding stress. By mid-February, I'd sent Elaine $8,000. The church, the catering, the bridal party, her father's medical bills. Each payment felt like an investment in our future together. Each thank you call and crying video message felt like proof of her gratitude and love. I keep a folder on my phone with screenshots of every wire transfer receipt, she told me one evening. Someday I'm going to frame them and hang them in our house. Evidence of how good you are to me. You don't need to keep receipts, sweetheart. I trust you completely. I want to keep them. I want to remember this feeling forever. What feeling? Being cherished. Being worth something to someone. You make me feel precious, Vernon. The final expense came in early March, 2 weeks before my flight to Manila. Elaine's wedding coordinator had quit unexpectedly, leaving her scrambling to find professional hair and makeup artists for the ceremony. The woman I found is the best in Davao City, she explained. She's done makeup for celebrity weddings, fashion shoots, magazine covers. But she's expensive. How expensive? $1,200 for both of us. But Vernon, she showed me photos of her work, and it's absolutely stunning. I want to look perfect for you on our wedding day. I was down to my last $3,000 in savings. The credit cards were getting close to their limits, but I couldn't say no. Not 2 weeks before our wedding. Not when she was trusting me to give her the perfect day. Transfer me her information, I said. I'll wire the money directly to her. Are you sure? I know this is a lot. Elaine, in 2 weeks you're going to be my wife. Your happiness is worth more to me than money. I'm going to be the most beautiful bride in the Philippines, she promised. Everyone is going to be so jealous that I married such a wonderful man. The makeup artist payment brought my total to $9,600, just under 10,000 Australian. My entire retirement nest egg, gone. But when Elaine sent me photos of the makeup trial, showing her transformed into a glowing, radiant bride-to-be, I knew it was worth every penny. 2 more weeks, she said during our final video call before my flight. 2 more weeks, and you'll be here with me forever. I was packing my suitcases, trying to fit my whole life into 3 bags. Most of my furniture was in storage. My lease was up at the end of March. There was no going back. Are you nervous? I asked her. No, babe. I'm excited. I've been waiting my whole life for you. Even though I'm old enough to be your father, age is just a number, remember? You're the youngest 58-year-old I know, and you're going to be the most handsome groom in Davao City. I looked at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. Gray hair, wrinkled face, soft belly from 8 months of retirement inactivity. Next to Elaine's 23-year-old beauty, I was going to look like her grandfather, not her husband. What if your friends think you're making a mistake? I asked. Then they don't know what real love looks like, she said firmly. Vernon, stop worrying. In 2 weeks, none of this will matter. We'll be married, we'll be together, and we'll have the rest of our lives to be happy. I love you, Elaine. I love you too, future husband. After we hung up, I sat on my bed surrounded by suitcases and tried to push down the anxiety that had been growing in my chest for weeks. $10,000 was a lot of money for anyone, but for a retired man living on a workers' compensation settlement, it was everything. But when you love someone, you don't count the cost. When you found your soulmate, money becomes meaningless. When you've been alone for 8 months and suddenly someone needs you, wants you, chooses you over everyone else in the world, you'll pay any price to keep that feeling alive. I had no idea that the most expensive lessons in life are the ones that teach you the difference between being needed and being used. Vernon, I can't talk long. I'm swamped with work. Elaine's voice sounded distant during our call on March 10th, just 5 days before my flight to Manila. She was sitting in what looked like a hotel room, not her usual bedroom setup. The lighting was different, harsher. "Where are you?" I asked. "That doesn't look like your room." "I'm at a client event in General Santos City. A wedding I'm coordinating this weekend. I told you about it last week, remember?" She glanced at something off camera, then back at me. "Baby, I really can't stay on long. The bride is having a meltdown about the flowers." This was the third time this week our calls had been cut short. For 4 months, Elaine had never missed a call, never rushed off the phone, never made me feel like I was interrupting her life. Suddenly, 5 days before our wedding, I felt like I was bothering her. "I just wanted to confirm the timeline for Saturday," I said. "My flight lands at 11 a.m., so I should be at the hotel by 1 p.m. The ceremony is at 2, right?" "Yes, 2 p.m. Vernon, I really have to go. The bride is crying about something. I'll call you tonight, okay?" The screen went black before I could say goodbye. I stared at my laptop for a long time, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my stomach. This was normal, right? She was a wedding coordinator. The week before her own wedding would be especially busy with work commitments. She was probably just stressed about making everything perfect. But something felt different. Her energy, her tone, the way she kept looking away from the camera like someone was in the room with her. For 4 months, I'd been the center of her attention during our video calls. Now I felt like a distraction. My phone rang at midnight my time, 6 p.m. hers. "Hi, babe. Sorry about earlier." That bride was absolutely losing her mind. She fired the florist 2 days before her wedding. Elaine sounded tired but more like herself. "How was your day?" "Quiet." I finished packing, turned in my rental car. "I'm ready to go." "Are you excited?" "Terrified and excited." "You?" There was a pause before she answered. "Same. It's a big step, you know. Getting married. Starting a life together. Sometimes I can't believe it's really happening." "Having second thoughts?" "No, God, no. Just nervous butterflies. You know how I get before big events." I didn't know how she got before big events. We'd known each other for 4 months, but I'd never seen her handle stress before. This version of Elaine, distracted and distant, was completely new to me. "Is everything okay with the wedding plans?" I asked. "All the vendors confirmed? The church is ready?" "Everything is perfect, Vernon. Stop worrying so much. You're going to give yourself a heart attack before you even get here." "I'm not worrying. I just want to make sure." "Baby, you need to trust me. I plan weddings for a living, remember? I know what I'm doing." Her tone was sharp, almost irritated. In 4 months of daily conversations, Elaine had never spoken to me with anything other than sweetness and patience. This felt like talking to a stranger. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to question you. I know you've got everything under control. It's just stress, babe. Once Saturday is over and we're officially married, everything will go back to normal. Better than normal. I can't wait to hold you in person." "Me too. I keep imagining what it will feel like to finally kiss you for real." We talked for another 20 minutes, but something was missing. The intimacy, the connection, the feeling that we were the only 2 people in the world. Instead, it felt like she was going through the motions of a conversation she'd had 1,000 times before. The next few days were worse. Tuesday's call lasted 15 minutes. Wednesday's was 10 minutes. Thursday, she didn't call at all. "So sorry, babe," she texted at 11 p.m. Thursday night. "Client emergency. Groom's family canceled half the catering order 6 hours before the wedding. I've been running around all day fixing it. Talk tomorrow before your flight?" But Friday morning came and went without a call. I texted her at breakfast, heading to the airport in 3 hours. "Call me?" No response. I called her directly at noon, straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Elaine. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." "Elaine, it's Vernon. I'm leaving for the airport in 2 hours. I just wanted to hear your voice before I get on the plane. I love you. See you tomorrow." At Brisbane Airport, I tried calling again while waiting to board. Voicemail again. I sent a text. About to board my flight. Can't wait to see you in 12 hours. I love you, future wife. During the 8-hour flight to Manila, I convinced myself that everything was fine. She was probably busy with last-minute wedding preparations. Maybe her phone was dead. Maybe she was at the salon getting her nails done. Maybe she was having a surprise bachelorette party with her friends. But the anxiety in my chest kept growing with every mile that passed beneath the plane. For 4 months, Elaine had been obsessed with staying in constant contact. She'd text me between calls just to say she was thinking about me. She'd send me photos of her lunch, her outfit, her view from the office window. Radio silence for 36 hours wasn't like her at all. I landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport at 11 a.m. Saturday morning, exactly as scheduled. The plan was to take a taxi to my hotel in Makati, shower and change into my wedding suit, then meet Elaine at the church in Davao City for our 2 p.m. ceremony. I turned on my phone after clearing customs, expecting to find a dozen messages from my bride. Instead, there was one text, sent 6 hours earlier. Safe flight, babe. See you soon. I called her immediately. Voicemail. In the taxi to the hotel, I tried again. Voicemail. At the hotel, I tried again. Voicemail. This is crazy, I said aloud to my empty hotel room. She's probably just getting ready. She's probably at the church already. I took a shower and put on my new blue suit, the one Elaine had helped me pick out during a video shopping session 2 months earlier. You look so handsome in blue, she'd said. Like a movie star. Looking at myself in the hotel bathroom mirror, I didn't look like a movie star. I looked like a terrified old man playing dress-up for a fantasy that might not be real. At 1 p.m., I called the church directly. A woman answered in Tagalog, then switched to English when I explained I was the groom for the 2 o'clock wedding. Sir, there is no wedding scheduled here today for 2 o'clock. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? The wedding for Vernon Richards and Elaine Santos. We paid a deposit. Sir, let me check our book again. I heard papers rustling. No, sir, no wedding today. No reservation under those names. That's impossible. We've been planning this for months. We paid deposits. Sir, perhaps you have the wrong church. There are many churches in Davao City. I hung up and immediately called Elaine again. This time, instead of going to voicemail, the call wouldn't connect at all. The number was disconnected. Panic hit me like a freight train. I called the hotel concierge and asked them to help me find transportation to Davao City. Sir, Davao is on Mindanao Island. You would need to fly there from Manila. It is not possible to drive. How long is the flight? About 2 hours, sir. But there are no flights this afternoon. The next flight to Davao is tomorrow morning. I sat on the hotel bed, still wearing my wedding suit, staring at my phone. Elaine's number was disconnected. The church had no record of our wedding. I was 8,000 kilometers from home, dressed like a groom with no bride. I opened Facebook and searched for Elaine's profile. It was gone. Not deactivated, not privacy protected. Gone. Like she'd never existed. This isn't happening, I said to the empty hotel room. This can't be happening. I tried calling her work number at the call center, but realized I'd never actually gotten that information from her. I tried searching for wedding coordinators in Davao City, but found dozens of them, none named Elaine Santos. At 3 p.m., the time we should have been exchanging vows, I was sitting in a Manila hotel room in my wedding suit crying like a child. Not just crying because my bride had disappeared, but crying because somewhere deep in my gut, I'd known this was too good to be true. A 23-year-old beauty falling in love with a 58-year-old retiree she'd never met, a fairy tale romance that moved from first message to marriage in 4 months, $10,000 in wedding expenses that kept growing every few weeks. I'd ignored every red flag because I wanted the fairy tale to be real more than I wanted to protect myself from heartbreak. But the worst part wasn't the money or the humiliation or even the loneliness. The worst part was that I still loved her. Even sitting there in my wedding suit with nowhere to go and no one to marry, I still hoped my phone would ring and she'd have some explanation that would make all of this make sense. I spent 3 days in that Manila hotel room, living off room service and false hope. Every few hours, I'd try Elaine's disconnected number, as if persistence could somehow bring her back to life. I'd refresh Facebook looking for her profile, as if she might reappear with an explanation that would fix everything. I'd stare at my email, waiting for a message that would reveal this whole thing as some terrible misunderstanding. On Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with a Facebook message from someone named May Santos. The profile picture showed a teenage girl with Elaine's eyes and smile. "Hi Vernon, I think you know my cousin Elaine. Are you the Australian man who was supposed to marry her?" My hands shook as I typed back. "Yes. Do you know where she is? What happened to our wedding? Can I call you? This is easier to explain on the phone." She called 5 minutes later. Her voice was young, nervous, apologetic. "Vernon, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to tell you this, but Elaine got married on Saturday." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean she got married? She was supposed to marry me." "She married her boyfriend Matteo. They've been together for 2 years. The wedding was here in Davao, at the same church she told you about." I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible. She's been talking to me every day for 4 months. She loves me. We were planning our life together." "Vernon, I'm really sorry, but she's been lying to you. She's been with Matteo this whole time. They lived together. They got engaged 6 months ago." 6 months ago? "But she was talking to me 6 months ago. We met in October." "I know. She showed us your messages. She thought it was funny at first, then she realized you were sending her money." My hotel room started spinning. "She showed you our messages?" "She showed everyone. Her friends, my family, even Matteo. They all knew about you. And nobody told her to stop? Nobody said this was wrong?" May's voice got quieter. "Vernon, you sent her $10,000. That's more money than my family makes in 2 years. Nobody was going to tell her to stop." I felt sick. Not just heartbroken, but physically sick. "Where is she now?" "On her honeymoon in Palawan with Matteo." "But Vernon, there's something else. Something you need to see." "What?" "I'm going to send you some photos. Please don't hate me for showing you, but I think you deserve to know the truth." 3 photos appeared in our Facebook chat. The first was Elaine in the wedding dress I'd paid for, standing next to a young Filipino man at an altar I'd never seen before. The second was the 2 of them cutting a cake at a reception filled with people I didn't recognize. The third was a group photo of wedding guests, with Elaine and Matteo in the center, both wearing gold wedding bands. She looked radiant, glowing, happier than I'd ever seen her during our video calls. Her new husband was handsome, young, everything I wasn't. They looked like they belonged together in a way that I'd never belonged with anyone. "The dress," I whispered into the phone. "That's the dress I paid for." "Yes. And the church, the flowers, the food. She used your money for everything. She called it the stupid Australians' wedding fund." I hung up the phone and threw it across the hotel room. It hit the wall and shattered into pieces. I was alone in a foreign country, wearing pajamas that cost more than most Filipinos made in a month, staring at photos of the woman I loved marrying someone else with my money. The rage came first. Pure, burning fury at Elaine for lying to me, at myself for believing her, at the cosmic joke that had turned my attempt at finding love into the most expensive humiliation of my life. I punched the hotel room wall until my knuckles bled. I screamed until my throat was raw. I threw everything I could reach until the room looked like a tornado had hit it. Then came the shame, deeper and more painful than the anger. How could I have been so stupid? How could a man who'd worked for 37 years, who'd managed multi-million-dollar engineering projects, who'd raised 2 sons and survived a marriage and divorce, be so completely fooled by a 23-year-old girl with an internet connection? But the worst part was the loneliness. Because even knowing everything I now knew, even seeing the photos of her with another man, part of me still missed her voice. Part of me still wished my broken phone would ring with her number, with her laugh, with her calling me babe one more time. I'd fallen in love with a ghost. A performance. A character she'd created to extract money from a lonely old man. But the feelings were real. My love for her had been real, even if everything about her had been fake. I spent 2 more days in Manila, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't afford to stay in the Philippines much longer. I couldn't afford to go home either. My savings were gone, my apartment lease was up, my furniture was in storage. I'd dismantled my entire life for a woman who was probably laughing about me on her honeymoon. On Thursday morning, I bought a ticket back to Brisbane. Not to Broome, because I had nowhere to live in Broome anymore. Brisbane, where I could stay with my ex-wife's sister until I figured out how to rebuild my life from scratch at 58 years old. At the airport, I threw away the blue wedding suit. It was the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever owned, but I couldn't stand the sight of it. I threw away the printed copies of my wedding vows, the hotel confirmations for our honeymoon, the list of Filipino phrases I'd memorized to impress her family. On the plane, I wrote an email to my sons explaining why I'd disappeared for a week without telling them. I tried to make it sound like a business trip gone wrong, not the complete destruction of my dignity and financial security. I couldn't bring myself to tell them about Elaine. Not yet, maybe not ever. Dad, what the hell? Kyle called me as soon as I landed in Brisbane. Mum said you've been unreachable for a week. We thought you were dead. I'm fine. Just had some business to take care of. What kind of business? You're retired. It's complicated, son. I'll explain later. Are you okay? You sound terrible. I looked at my reflection in the airport bathroom mirror. I looked like I'd aged a decade in a week. Gray, hollow, defeated. I'm okay, I lied. Just tired. But I wasn't okay. I was broken in ways I didn't even understand yet, and I had no idea how to begin putting the pieces back together. My ex-wife's sister Helen let me sleep on her couch in Brisbane for 2 weeks while I tried to figure out what came next. She didn't ask many questions, which I was grateful for, but I could see the concern in her eyes every time she looked at me. I'd lost 15 pounds in a week, stopped shaving, barely spoke except to say thank you for her hospitality. Vernon, what happened in the Philippines? She finally asked on day 10. We were sitting in her kitchen drinking coffee while her husband was at work. You look like someone died. Someone did, I said. Me. That's not funny. I'm not trying to be funny. I told her everything. The whole story, start to finish. Meeting Elaine online, the 4 months of daily calls, the wedding plans, the money, the disappearance, the photos of her marrying someone else. Helen listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to horror to something that looked like pity. $10,000? She said when I finished. Vernon, that's everything you had. I know. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you ask for advice? Because I knew what everyone would say. That she was too young, too beautiful, too good to be true. I didn't want to hear it. Because you knew we'd be right. I nodded. Because I knew you'd be right. Helen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry this happened to you. But Vernon, you have to report this. This is fraud. She stole your money. How? I sent it willingly. I have records of every transfer. She never put a gun to my head. She lied to you. She pretended to be someone she wasn't. That's criminal. That afternoon, Helen drove me to the police station. The desk sergeant listened to my story with the tired expression of someone who'd heard variations of it a dozen times before. Romance scam, he said when I finished. We see these all the time. Usually involves Nigeria or Ghana, but the Philippines is becoming more common. Can you do anything about it? Not much. International jurisdiction issues. The money was sent voluntarily to a foreign country. Unless you can prove she committed fraud within Australian borders, there's no crime we can prosecute. So she just gets away with it? Most of them do. Sorry, mate, expensive lesson, but that's about all it is. I tried contacting a lawyer who specialized in international fraud. He listened to my story over the phone for 15 minutes, then quoted me a retainer fee of $5,000 with no guarantee of recovery. Even if we could prove fraud, he explained, collecting judgments in the Philippines is nearly impossible. You'd spend more in legal fees than you lost to the scam. I tried calling the bank in Davao where I'd sent the wire transfers. They confirmed that the account belonged to Elaine Santos, that the money had been withdrawn, and that they couldn't provide any additional information to foreign nationals without a court order. I tried hiring a private investigator in the Philippines. The one I found online wanted $2,000 up front and warned me that even if he located Elaine, there was nothing he could do to force her to return the money. Every avenue led to the same conclusion. The money was gone forever. But the worst part wasn't the financial loss. The worst part was the evidence that kept surfacing, piece by piece, showing me just how elaborate the deception had been. May, Elaine's cousin, stayed in touch with me through Facebook. She seemed genuinely sorry for what had happened and willing to answer my questions, perhaps out of guilt for her family's role in the scam. How long was she planning this? I asked during one of our conversations. She's been doing it for over a year, May admitted. You weren't the first Australian. There was a man from Perth before you, and one from Adelaide before him. My stomach dropped. How many men? At least 5 that I know of. Maybe more. She has different Facebook profiles for different countries. One for Australians, one for Americans, one for British men. And everyone in your family knew? Her parents didn't know at first. They thought she was just making friends online. But when she started getting money transfers, they figured it out. Nobody said anything because the money was helping everyone. What about her boyfriend? Her husband now? Matteo knew from the beginning. He thought it was funny. He called you guys her retirement plan. Each new piece of information felt like another knife in my chest. This wasn't a crime of passion or a mistake that got out of hand. This was a carefully planned, methodically executed fraud operation that had been running for over a year. I wasn't the victim of a broken heart. I was the victim of a business plan. Did she ever feel bad about it? I asked May. Did she ever seem guilty? At first, maybe. But then you started sending more money, and it got easier for her. She said you were rich and lonely, and she was just giving you what you wanted to pay for. What I wanted to pay for. Attention. Affection. The fantasy of being with a young, beautiful woman. She said all you old Western men were the same. You'd pay anything to feel special. I hung up on that conversation and didn't talk to May again for several days. Because as much as I hated to admit it, Elaine hadn't been entirely wrong. I had been paying for attention and affection. I had been buying the fantasy of being loved by someone young and beautiful. The fact that it was all fake didn't change the fact that I'd been willing to pay for it. Late at night, lying on Helen's couch, I'd replay our conversations in my head, looking for clues I'd missed. They were everywhere, once I knew what to look for. The way she always steered conversations away from her daily life. The way she never gave me specific details about her work or her family. The way she always had new expenses that required immediate wire transfers. The way she'd never offered to split the costs. The way she'd never suggested I send smaller amounts. The way she'd always had perfect explanations for why she couldn't contribute financially to our wedding. I'm just a poor girl from the Philippines. She'd said more than once. You're the successful engineer. It's natural that you'd pay for everything. I'd been so flattered by her appreciation, so grateful for her gratitude, that I'd never questioned the fundamental imbalance. In 4 months of daily conversations, she'd never once offered to send me anything. Not a gift, not a photo, not even a postcard. The relationship had been entirely transactional from her perspective, even though it had felt like love from mine. The hardest thing to accept was that some part of me had known all along. Deep down, buried under the loneliness and desperation and hope, I'd known that beautiful 23-year-old women don't fall in love with 58-year-old strangers on the internet. I'd known that real love doesn't require constant wire transfers. I'd known that fairy tales don't happen to men like me. But I'd chosen to believe anyway. Because the alternative was admitting that I was going to spend the rest of my life alone. 3 weeks after returning from the Philippines, I was still sleeping on Helen's couch and still hadn't told my sons what really happened. Kyle kept calling, asking when I was going to find a new place, when I was going back to Broome, what my plans were for the rest of the year. I gave him vague answers about reassessing my options and taking some time to figure things out. "Dad, you're scaring me," he said during a Sunday afternoon call. "You sound depressed. Are you seeing anyone? A counselor or something?" "I'm fine, son. Just adjusting to retirement." "You retired 8 months ago. What's there to adjust to now?" I almost told him then. Almost confessed the whole humiliating story about falling in love with a stranger, sending her my life savings, flying to the Philippines to marry a woman who was already married to someone else. Almost admitted that his old man had been stupid enough to believe that love could happen through a computer screen. But I couldn't do it. Not to Kyle, who was trying to build his own life with his partner in Perth. Not to James, my younger son, who was dealing with job stress and relationship problems of his own. They had enough to worry about without adding their father's spectacular failure to the list. "I might move to Brisbane permanently," I said instead. "Broome is getting expensive, and I like the weather here better." "Since when do you like Brisbane weather? You always said it was too humid." "People change, Kyle. Preferences change." "Dad, something's wrong. I can hear it in your voice. Just tell me what's going on." The truth sat in my throat like a stone. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to tell someone who might understand, who might not judge me too harshly for being such a complete fool. But the shame was too overwhelming. "I made some bad investments," I said finally. "Lost more money than I should have. I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward." It wasn't exactly a lie. I had made a bad investment. I'd invested $10,000 in a relationship that never existed. The return on that investment was humiliation, loneliness, and the knowledge that I was capable of being deceived by someone young enough to be my granddaughter. "How much money?" Kyle asked. "Enough that I need to be more careful going forward." "Dad, if you need help." "I don't need help. I just need time to get back on my feet." After we hung up, I sat in Helen's backyard and tried to imagine having that conversation honestly. "Son, I met a girl online who was 35 years younger than me. I thought she loved me, so I sent her $10,000 to pay for our wedding. Turns out she was already married to someone else and used my money to pay for their ceremony instead. How do you tell your children that their father is that stupid? How do you explain that loneliness made you so desperate that you ignored every red flag, every rational thought, every instinct that told you something was wrong?" Kyle and James already thought I was pathetic. They'd made that clear during the divorce, when they took their mother's side and stopped visiting, stopped calling, stopped including me in their lives, except for obligatory birthday wishes and Christmas cards. Dad's always been selfish. I'd overheard Kyle telling his brother during one of their rare visits to Broome. "Everything's always about him, his feelings, his problems. Mom's better off without him." They weren't wrong. I had been selfish during the marriage. I'd worked long contracts overseas, missed school plays and football games, prioritized my career over my family. When Sandra asked for the divorce, part of me was almost relieved. I'd been failing as a husband and father for years. At least divorce made it official. But now, telling them about Elaine would just confirm everything they already believed about me. That I was selfish enough to chase after a girl their age, that I was stupid enough to send my retirement savings to a stranger, that I was pathetic enough to believe someone could love me for who I was instead of what I could provide. So I kept the secret. When Kyle suggested I join a senior social group to meet people my own age, I said I'd think about it. When James called to tell me about his new job promotion, I congratulated him and pretended I wasn't sitting in someone else's living room with nowhere to go and nothing to do. When Helen asked if I wanted to stay for dinner again, I said yes and tried to smile like a man who wasn't completely lost. The isolation was worse than the financial loss. At least the money was just numbers on a bank statement. The loneliness was a physical ache that got stronger every day. I'd wake up on Helen's couch and reach for my phone, forgetting for a moment that Elaine wouldn't be texting me good morning anymore. I'd see elderly couples at the grocery store holding hands and wonder if I'd ever have that kind of companionship again. But the worst moments were when I'd catch myself still missing her. Not the real Elaine who'd stolen my money and married someone else, but the version of her I'd fallen in love with. The sweet, caring girl who'd called me every day, who'd listened to my problems, who'd made me feel valuable and wanted and loved. That version of Elaine had never existed, but my feelings for her were real. The grief was real. The loss was real. Even knowing I'd been scammed, even seeing the photos of her wedding to another man, I still mourned the relationship I thought we'd had. "You need to talk to someone," Helen said one evening after dinner. "A counselor, a therapist, someone professional." "I'm fine." "You're not fine, Vernon. You're depressed. You barely eat. You don't sleep well. You spend all day staring at nothing. This isn't normal grief. This is something deeper." What am I supposed to tell a therapist? That I fell in love with a scammer and gave her my life savings? Yes, that's exactly what you tell them. Because you're not the first person this has happened to, and you won't be the last. There are support groups for this kind of thing. Support groups for idiots? Support groups for people who've been victimized by romance scams. The word victimized made me angry. I didn't want to be a victim. Victims were passive, helpless, innocent. I'd made active choices. I'd ignored warning signs. I'd chosen to believe what I wanted to believe instead of what the evidence was telling me. "I wasn't victimized," I said. "I was stupid. You were lonely," Helen corrected. "And someone took advantage of that loneliness. That makes you a victim, not an idiot." But sitting there in her kitchen, looking at the sympathy in her eyes, I felt like both. On my 40th day sleeping on Helen's couch, I woke up before dawn and couldn't get back to sleep. It was a Thursday morning in late April, and the Brisbane sunrise was painting the living room walls gold through the curtains. I'd been lying there for 6 weeks, wallowing in shame and self-pity, replaying the same humiliating memories over and over like a broken record. I got up quietly and went to the bathroom. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I'd lost 25 pounds since the Philippines. My hair had gone completely gray. My face was gaunt, hollow-eyed, defeated. I looked like a man who'd given up on life. But as I stared at that reflection, something shifted. Maybe it was the early morning light, or maybe I'd finally hit bottom hard enough to bounce back, but for the first time in 6 weeks, I didn't see a fool looking back at me. I saw a man who'd made a mistake. A big, expensive, humiliating mistake, but still just a mistake. "You're still here," I said quietly to my reflection. "You're still breathing. You're still standing." I thought about Elaine for a moment, but not with the usual mixture of rage and longing. For the first time, I tried to see her clearly. She was 23 years old, living in poverty in a developing country, watching Western men on the internet complain about being lonely while she worried about feeding her family. From her perspective, I wasn't a victim. I was a resource. That didn't make what she did right, but it made it understandable. She'd seen an opportunity and taken it. She'd told me exactly what I wanted to hear because I'd been willing to pay to hear it. In her world, that probably wasn't even unusual. It was just business. The real question wasn't why she'd done it. The real question was why I'd let her. I went to Helen's kitchen and made coffee, then sat at her table with a notebook and pen. For the first time since the Philippines, I was going to think clearly about what had happened and what came next. At the top of the page I wrote, "What I know for sure." Under that I listed the facts. I sent $10,000 to a woman I'd never met in person. She used that money to marry someone else. I have no legal recourse to get the money back. I am currently homeless and nearly broke. I am 58 years old and need to rebuild my life from scratch. Then I wrote, "What I learned." Under that, loneliness makes you vulnerable to manipulation. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Real love doesn't require constant financial proof. I ignored red flags because I wanted the fairy tale to be real. I'm capable of loving someone even if they don't love me back. Finally, I wrote, "What comes next?" This was the hard part. I sat there for an hour, staring at that blank section, trying to figure out how to move forward. Then I started writing. Find a place to live that I can afford. Find a job or source of income. Stop hiding from my sons. Stop feeling sorry for myself. Accept that I may never get married again, and that's okay. Learn to be alone without being lonely. When Helen came downstairs for breakfast, she found me dressed and shaved for the first time in weeks. "You look different," she said. "Better. I feel different. I've been thinking." "About what?" "About the fact that what happened to me wasn't unique. Romance scams happen to thousands of people every year. Smart people, successful people, educated people. The common factor isn't stupidity, it's loneliness." Helen poured herself coffee and sat across from me. "That's a healthier way to look at it. I was lonely after the divorce. I was lonely after retirement. I was lonely living by myself in Broome with nothing to do and no one to talk to. When Elaine showed up offering companionship and affection, I grabbed onto it like a life raft. And there's nothing wrong with wanting companionship. No, there isn't. But there is something wrong with believing that love can be bought. That's what I was really doing. I was trying to purchase a relationship. I told Helen about my decision to move forward instead of backward. I was going to look for a small apartment I could afford, probably in a cheaper area outside Brisbane. I was going to contact some of my old engineering colleagues about consulting work. I was going to call my sons and tell them the truth about what had happened. "Are you sure you're ready for that conversation?" she asked. "No. But I'm tired of carrying this secret around, and maybe they deserve to know that their father is capable of making mistakes." That afternoon, I called a rental agency and started looking at apartments in the outer suburbs. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. One-bedroom units in working-class neighborhoods where I could live quietly and rebuild my savings. That evening I called Kyle. "Dad, hi. How are you feeling? You sound better." "I am better. And I have something to tell you. Something I should have told you weeks ago." I told him everything. The online relationship, the wire transfers, the wedding that never happened, the discovery that I'd been scammed. I told him about the shame and depression and the weeks I'd spent on Helen's couch feeling sorry for myself. Kyle was quiet for a long time after I finished. Finally, he said, "Dad, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I thought you'd be angry. Or disappointed." "Why would I be angry? You got hurt. You made a mistake, sure, but you got hurt. Because it was such a stupid mistake. Dad, do you know how many of my friends have been catfished online? It's not just older people. It happens to everyone. The internet makes it easy to pretend to be someone you're not. We talked for 2 hours. Kyle asked questions without judgment, offered advice without condescension. He even offered to lend me money to get back on my feet, which I declined but appreciated more than I could express. You should call James too, he said before we hung up. He'll want to know. Will he? Dad, we love you. We may not always show it well, but we love you, and we want you to be okay. After that call, I went back to the bathroom mirror. The man looking back at me still looked older, grayer, thinner than he had 6 weeks earlier. But he didn't look defeated anymore. He looked like someone who'd survived something difficult and was ready to try again. I thought about Elaine one more time. Not with anger or longing, but with something closer to gratitude. Not for the scam itself, but for what it had taught me about myself. I was capable of deep feeling. I was capable of hope. I was capable of taking risks for love, even if those risks didn't pay off. Those weren't weaknesses. Those were human qualities that made life worth living. I wasn't going to let one dishonest person take those qualities away from me. 6 months after the Philippines, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Ipswich, 40 kilometers southwest of Brisbane. It wasn't much worn carpet, dated kitchen, neighbors who played music too loud on weekends, but it was mine. I'd furnished it with pieces from secondhand stores and clearance sales. The rent was affordable on my pension, and I'd found part-time consulting work with a small engineering firm that kept me busy 3 days a week. I was surviving. Some days, I was even happy. The healing hadn't been linear. There were still nights when I'd lie in bed thinking about Elaine's voice, missing the version of her I'd fallen in love with. There were still moments when I'd see a young Asian woman at the grocery store and feel a punch of recognition that left me breathless. There were still days when the loneliness felt so heavy I could barely get out of bed. But there were also good days. Days when I'd work on a project that reminded me why I'd loved engineering. Days when I'd call Kyle or James and we'd talk like adults who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Days when I'd sit on my small balcony with a cup of coffee and feel something that might have been contentment. I'd joined a support group for romance scam victims. Helen had been right there were dozens of us in Brisbane alone. Men and women of all ages who'd lost money, time, and dignity to people who'd never loved them. The stories were eerily similar. Isolated people looking for connection, skilled manipulators offering exactly what their targets needed to hear, gradual requests for money that escalated until the fantasy collapsed. The shame is the worst part, said Margaret, a 70-year-old widow who'd lost her late husband's life insurance payout to a man claiming to be a deployed soldier. Not the money, although that hurts. The shame of admitting you were that desperate for love. It's not desperate to want companionship, said Dr. Kim, the psychologist who facilitated our group. It's human. These scammers are skilled at identifying and exploiting that basic human need. I'd learned that romance scams were a multi-billion-dollar industry, primarily run out of West Africa and Southeast Asia. The scammers worked from scripts, shared successful techniques, even traded victim lists between operations. What had felt personal and intimate to me had been routine business to Elaine. I'd also learned that I'd gotten off relatively easy. Margaret had lost $40,000. Tom, a divorced teacher, had lost his house trying to help his fiancée get out of a Turkish prison that didn't exist. Sarah, a nurse, had borrowed against her retirement fund to send money to a widowed doctor whose daughter needed surgery. $10,000 was painful, but it hadn't destroyed me. I still had my pension, my health, my skills. I could rebuild. One evening in October, exactly a year after I'd first messaged Elaine, I was cooking dinner when my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Someone named Elena Santos had sent me a friend request. My blood went cold. Different spelling, but close enough to be suspicious. I clicked on the profile. The woman in the photos was Filipino, beautiful, young. Not Elaine, but similar enough to make my stomach churn. The profile was new, with only a handful of photos and no personal information. I declined the request and blocked the account immediately, but it got me thinking about Elaine again. What was she doing now? Had she moved on to other victims? Or had marrying Mateo ended her scamming career? Was she happy with her real husband? Or was their relationship as transactional as ours had been? I found myself curious rather than angry. The rage had burned out months ago, leaving behind something cooler and more analytical. I wanted to understand her, not for closure or forgiveness, but simply to make sense of what had happened. Through May, her cousin, I'd learned a few more details. Elaine and Mateo had used my money for a lavish wedding that was still being talked about in their community months later. They'd bought a motorcycle with the leftover funds and were planning to open a small business together. Elaine had quit the call center but was still coordinating weddings, legitimate ones now, apparently. Does she ever talk about me? I'd asked May during one of our conversations. Not really, May had admitted. She says it's in the past. She doesn't like to think about it anymore. That had stung more than I'd expected. While I was still processing the betrayal, still working through the emotions, still trying to understand what had happened, Elaine had simply moved on. I was a closed chapter in her life, if I'd ever been a chapter at all. But maybe that was for the best. Maybe the ability to compartmentalize, to separate business from emotion, was what had allowed her to run her scam so successfully. Maybe feeling nothing was easier than feeling guilty. I thought about sending her a message. Not angry, not accusatory, just curious. I wanted to ask if she'd ever felt anything real during our conversations, if any part of her had genuinely liked me, if she'd ever considered telling me the truth. But I knew better. Any contact would just open the door for her to manipulate me again. Besides, what would be the point? The answers wouldn't change what had happened, or give me back my money. They'd just satisfy my curiosity at the cost of my peace of mind. Instead, I wrote her a letter I never sent. I wrote it longhand in a notebook, late one night when the loneliness was particularly sharp. I told her about the months of recovery, about learning to trust my judgment again, about the support group and the new apartment and the slow process of rebuilding my life. I don't hate you, I wrote. I understand why you did it. You saw an opportunity and you took it. In your position, desperate and poor, maybe I would have done the same thing. But I want you to know that you didn't just take my money. You took my faith in people. You took my willingness to be vulnerable. You took my belief that love could happen at any age, in any circumstance. I wrote about the good parts too. How she'd helped me realize I was capable of deep feeling again after years of emotional numbness following the divorce. How the fantasy of our relationship had given me something to look forward to during the darkest period of my life. How even fake love had felt better than no love at all. Maybe that says something terrible about me, I wrote. Maybe it means I was so desperate for connection that I was willing to pay for it. But it also means I haven't given up on love entirely. I've just learned to be more careful about where I invest it. After finishing the letter, I tore it up and threw it away. The writing had been therapeutic, but the words were for me, not for her. A few weeks later, I met someone. Not romantically, I wasn't ready for that yet, and might never be. But I met someone who reminded me that genuine human connection was still possible. Her name was Rose, and she was in the support group. 62 years old, retired teacher, victim of a military romance scam that had cost her $30,000. She was funny, smart, brutally honest about her own mistakes and vulnerabilities. I knew he was probably fake, she told the group one evening. The photos were too perfect, the story was too dramatic. But I was so lonely after my husband died that I didn't care. I just wanted someone to say good morning to me every day. After the meeting, we went for coffee. Not a date, just two people who understood each other's experience in a way that others couldn't. Do you think you'll ever try online dating again? She asked. Maybe. Someday. With better boundaries and lower expectations. What would those boundaries look like? I thought about it. No money transfers ever, for any reason. Video calls within the first week. Meeting in person within the first month. No long-distance relationships with people I can't drive to see. That's a good list. I might steal it. We became friends. Not romantic partners, but genuine friends who talked regularly, met for coffee weekly, and occasionally went to movies or museums together. She was the first person since Elaine who made me feel less alone in the world. Through Rose and the support group, I started volunteering with an organization that educated seniors about online scams. I'd tell my story to groups of retirees, explaining the warning signs I'd missed, the psychological techniques scammers used, the importance of maintaining skepticism even when someone was telling you exactly what you wanted to hear. How do you protect yourself without becoming cynical? An elderly man asked after one of my presentations. You don't protect yourself by avoiding all risks, I said. You protect yourself by taking smarter risks. You can still be open to love and connection. You just have to verify that the person on the other end is real before you invest your heart or your money. It felt good to turn my humiliation into something useful. Every person who left one of those presentations with better awareness might avoid what had happened to me. My expensive lesson could prevent someone else's financial and emotional disaster. On the first anniversary of meeting Elaine, I did something I'd been planning for months. I opened a new savings account and made my first deposit, $50 from my consulting work. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I was building a new nest egg, slowly and carefully, for whatever came next. I thought about her that day, but not with the crushing weight of earlier months. I thought about her the way you might think about a natural disaster you'd survived, as something that had happened to you, shaped you, but didn't define you. She got to forget me. She got to move on with her real husband, spending my money on their real life together. She got to tell herself whatever story she needed to tell to sleep at night. But I got to remember. I got to learn from what had happened. I got to choose how to respond to betrayal, whether with bitterness or wisdom, whether with isolation or connection. I chose wisdom. I chose connection. And late at night, when the apartment was quiet and I was settling into sleep, I sometimes felt something that surprised me: gratitude. Not for the scam itself, but for surviving it. Not for the money I'd lost, but for the strength I'd found. Not for the fake love, but for the real friendships that had grown from its ashes. Some people send money for love. I sent mine for the truth. The truth that I was stronger than I'd known. The truth that I could rebuild from nothing. The truth that even at 58, even after spectacular failure, even after having my heart broken by someone who'd never loved me at all, I could still choose hope over cynicism. That truth was worth every penny. I was sitting on my balcony one evening in December, watching the sun set over the Brisbane suburbs, when my phone rang. It was Kyle, calling with news that he and his partner were expecting their first child. "You're going to be a grandfather, Dad." I felt tears in my eyes. Good tears, for the first time in over a year. "That's wonderful, son. I'm so happy for you both. We want you to be involved, Dad. We want the baby to know their grandfather." I'd like that very much. After we hung up, I thought about the future for the first time since the Philippines. A grandchild to love and teach and spoil. A reason to save money that had nothing to do with romance or relationships. A chance to be the kind of grandfather I'd failed to be as a father. I thought about telling that grandchild my story someday, when they were old enough to understand, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that people can survive their worst mistakes and find meaning in their deepest failures. Elaine had taken my money and broken my heart, but she hadn't taken everything. She hadn't taken my capacity for love, my ability to hope, my willingness to try again. And in the end, those were the only things that really mattered. The sun finished setting over Brisbane, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. I finished my coffee, went inside, and started making plans for tomorrow. Because tomorrow was all any of us really had, and I wasn't going to waste another day looking backward when the future was still waiting to be written. Somewhere in the Philippines, Elaine was probably having dinner with her real husband, living her real life, funded by my real money. I hoped she was happy. I hoped Mateo treated her well. I hoped they built something authentic together with the foundation of lies she'd constructed. But that was her story now. This was mine, and I was finally ready to keep writing it.